Hello, so this week we are talking about listening and note-taking, both of which are, again, critical to being a successful college student. And we're going to start with a little listening activity. So hearing and listening are two different things. You can hear all kinds of noises, you can hear people talk, but if you're not concentrating and listening, you're not going to catch everything. So go ahead and listen to this and see if you can solve the problem. So you are driving a bus, you go east 12 miles and turn south and go 2 miles, and then you take on 9 passengers. Then you turn west and go 3 miles and let off 4 passengers. How old do you think the bus driver is? So think about that for a second, and let's see what you come up with. So it typically takes students a few minutes to figure this out, but the bus driver, for my answer, would be 40 because that's how old I am. So however old you are, that would be the answer to the question, because the exercise says you are driving a bus. You go east 12 miles and so forth. And so a lot of students will miss the you because they're concentrating on the number. They think it's going to be some type of mathematical equation, and so they're focused in on that and don't listen to the question that's being asked. That goes the same with test taking. Read the entire thing before you sit and try to figure it out. Look over the entire test before you do all of the problems, and we'll talk about that more next week. All right, so students spend about 50% of their waking hours just listening. For the amount of time you spend in the classroom, the amount of listening time can be almost 100%. It's very hard to do. It's very hard to concentrate for 100% of the time. I think it's probably impossible, actually. Your mind is going to wander. You're going to focus in on something else. You're going to, think about what's going on around you or things that you have going on at home. But it's important that you tune back in so that you can really hear what your instructor is saying, especially for exams and things like that. All right, so let's talk about good listening. So good listening habits. I like to talk about the AAA listening, the attitude, your attention, and making adjustments. So it's really important that you maintain a positive attitude when you go into class. And that's going to pave the way for keeping your mind open to what's happening around class. If you go in with the attitude of, I hate this class, I can't stand this instructor, I hate the way they lecture, it's going to be really difficult to listen to what they have to say. And so really just checking your attitude at the door, making sure that you're going in to the lecture with a positive attitude so that you can get the most out of the class as possible. The second one is attention, so striving to pay attention. Your attention must focus on the lecture. Again, there's going to be times where you gear off, and you just have to remember to bring yourself back, especially when you find yourself daydreaming, for a few minutes. Make sure that you're not doing that for too long. So be sure that you bring yourself back. When you hear a lecture, the words are entering your short-term memory, and you need to process those so that you can get them into your long-term memory. And so that's really, really important. You don't want things to go in one ear and out the other. So it's really important that you're taking notes, that you are tape recording the lecture if the instructor will let you do that, to help you in listening to them again for the times that maybe you do go and daydream for a little bit. And then adjustment. It's important that you develop the ability to adjust. You have to be flexible enough to follow the lecture regardless of the direction that it's going to take. So your instructor may go off on a tangent that you don't really care about. And so, again, you just have to adjust and refocus and come back to when it gets back on target. Be sure that you ask questions. If you can be involved in what's happening as part of the class, that's going to help you in being able to listen better. And so if you can ask questions or make a remark or answer a question that the instructor is asking you, it's going to help you to focus in on listening better. There's also something called the T-zone. So in a classroom, if you imagine the instructor standing at the front of the class, the T-zone is straight down the middle and across. And if you sit in one of those seats, you're more likely to maintain your concentration a little bit longer because the instructor focuses in on those areas. Being in the front of the class, I know a lot of students gear or when they first walk in, they go towards the back of the classroom. But it's a little bit more intimidating to ask a question when you're in the back of the classroom, because what happens? You ask a question and everybody turns around and looks at you. So now you have 60 pairs of eyes staring at you. If you're sitting at the front and you ask a question, who looks at you? The instructor and maybe one or two people sitting next to you have their eyes on you. So it's a lot less intimidating if you sit in the front row to ask a question. Okay, so there's 3 different common problems to listening. The first problem is called pseudo-listening. So pseudo-listening, you look good on the outside, but you're really not listening. So think of that as fake listening. You need to pay attention and be locked in. Somebody could be paying attention and be really locked in. They could be looking all around, not paying attention at all, talking to people around them, or again, just they look good from the outside, but they're really not listening. They're taking a mental vacation. So it's important that you really catch yourself that even when you look good, you may not be listening, and so making sure that you are catching yourself when you are doing that fake listening. Then there's selective listening. You get distracted, and so you tune out. The instructor says something, that triggers something else, and you start tuning out and focusing in on, your plans for the weekend or whatever it might be. And so you listen for a little bit and then start focusing in on something else. Then there's the critical listening. So critical listening is when you criticize the instructor. The instructor says something or the speaker says something that bothers you, so you kind of go on a tangent about what the person said. I can't believe they said that. I can't believe they are voting for that person, or whatever it may be. It could also be just their appearance. You start criticizing the way they look and going off on a tangent in that way as well within your mind. So we have 6 different solutions to these problems. One is awareness. Stay aware of how often you zone out. Why do you zone out? Is it at a certain point in the lecture? Are 3-hour lecture classes not a good idea for you because you're going to lose your concentration? When do you zone out? Is it a certain time of the day? I have students say to me, well, I'm going to take my class at 7:30 in the morning because the parking's the best. Well, they don't focus best at 7:30 in the morning. And so you have to think about that. What is your best time of the day? Is it, after lunch? Is it in the evening? Or is it in the morning? So what can you do to stay in the game? What can you do to force yourself to keep that awareness going? Be physically and mentally prepared to listen. So it's important that, of course, you have a good night's sleep, that you have eaten something. If you know that the class is a tough class for you to pay attention in because you find it boring, make sure that you've done these things. That's going to help you to pay attention a little bit better. Try to leave your personal issues outside the door. Push them out of your mind when they creep in. I know it's tough. I know it's hard when you're, battling something, a relationship or something with your kids or something at work, and that is on your mind and it creeps in. But really try to check that stuff at the door so you can really focus in on what's happening in class. The third one is to set a goal. So what should your goal be? 100% of the time it's hard. That's hard to make that goal, but try to aim for that. Again, just to pay attention when you can pull yourself out of the mind vacation that you've gone on. We're in a time where things are answered for us almost immediately. You have your phone, you can get on Google and ask a question. You have Siri to help you out. And so sometimes when things don't interest us, it's very hard to pay attention And so it's important that you also choose your classes well, that you don't just choose things, as I said before, because it's a good time of day that fits in your schedule, but you really look at the course and is it of interest to me? So we've talked about the T-zone, sitting down the middle or across the front. You're going to be able to hear better and see better. You're going to have less distractions. When you're in the back, you're watching everybody. You see what's going on. You're surrounded by all kinds of people, and so it can be really, really distracting. It's also harder to fall asleep when you're up in the front. So if you know that, you're working nights and you're tired and it's hard for you to, focus because you're so tired, sitting in the front will also help you as well. Practicing. So, the more you strive to pay attention 100% of the time, the better your listening skills are going to be. So practice, just concentrating on being a good listener. And then the sixth one is pretend to be fascinated. So fake it until you make it. Again, if you've enrolled in a class that's not the best topic for you, it's not interesting, just do your best to pretend that, okay, I have to get through this and I have to do my best to do well in this class. Okay, so what I'd like you to do now is take out a piece of paper and a pencil, and I'm going to read to you 5 sentences. We're going to do a little dictation practice here. Now, of course, we're online, so I don't know what you're doing, but I'm hoping that you will do the exercise with me. So as I read these sentences, I don't want you to write anything down while I'm talking. Once I finish, you can write it down, but it has to be word for word and it needs to be perfect. And so let's see how you do. So again, when I'm talking, I'm going to read 5 sentences, and I don't want you to write anything down. Okay? So I'll read one, and then I'll give you a few minutes to write that down. Then I'll read another one. You can write it down afterwards, and so forth. And then we'll see how you do. Okay? All right. So the first one, the first sentence, and these are going to start off easy and get a little bit harder. So everyone in the stands was cheering. Everyone in the stands was cheering. So take a few minutes to write that one down. All right. Second one. The tree fell over due to a big storm last Wednesday night. The tree fell over due to a big storm last Wednesday night. So take a few minutes to write that down. All right, number 3. He usually eats 2 soft tacos and a burrito whenever he goes to Taco Bell. He usually eats 2 soft tacos and a burrito whenever he goes to Taco Bell. Give you a few seconds here. All right, the fourth one. The family of 4 spent the day in San Francisco shopping, riding a cable car, and eating at local restaurants. The family of 4 spent the day in San Francisco shopping, riding a cable car, and eating at local restaurants. And the last one, before heading out the door, the young man made sure he had everything he needed for the day, including his phone, wallet, and keys. Before heading out the door, the young man made sure he had everything he needed for the day, including his phone, wallet, and keys. So take a few minutes to write that one down. All right, so here they are, so you can check and see how well you did. A lot of times students miss a word or two or completely do things different. I've had a student on the third one totally change that to, hamburgers and fries at McDonald's. And so as you practice dictation, you'll get better at listening and being able to take notes. You're always going to be behind what your teacher is saying as you take notes. And so if you practice dictation, you'll get better at your ability to concentrate and write down what it is that the person said. When you take notes, you don't want to be writing word for word, but dictation can help you in, again, just focusing and hearing and concentrating better. So when you take notes, accuracy is important, and learning some type of shorthand for yourself is really, really important. So we're going to go ahead and go on to note-taking now. So there's things that you can do before, during, and after class to ensure that you have notes that will help you study. So I've had students before saying, I don't take notes, I don't need notes, and you really have to know what works well for you. There are some students that just sitting and listening, they're an auditory learner and they can just sit and listen to the lecture and they don't need to write down a whole lot of notes. Their notes are, maybe 5 sentences and that's it. There's other students that they're going to try to write down every single thing that's on the PowerPoint. You don't want to do that. You don't want to waste your time writing down word for word what is in a PowerPoint. You need to pick out the key things and write those down. So it's really important that you start to be able to pick out what the main ideas are and write notes from there. So we're going to talk about what you can do before, during, and after class to be well prepared. So before class, we already talked about attitude. Going in with a positive attitude is really important. Be prepared. Have supplies that match your style. One year when I was teaching note-taking, I had a student who showed up and he was taking notes on a yellow square Post-it pad. And that's what he was using for his notes. And he just said, it's all I had. It was what was in my car. I forgot my backpack today. And so being sure that you're prepared with the supplies that you need. What do you use? A pen or a pencil? I highly recommend that you use pen. The notes are going to stay forever if you use pen. If you use pencil, they're going to fade away. It also can rub off on your hand as you're writing if you're using pencil. You need to figure out what works best for you. Do you want a binder with loose leaf paper or do you want a notebook? Do you want lines or you don't want lines? Do you want to use a paper that is meant for note-taking, that, like for instance with the Cornell note-taking system, which I'm going to talk about here in just a little bit? Do you want to use different colors? Do you want to have highlighters as you take notes so you can highlight as you're taking the notes? So have all your supplies. Use things that work for you. Maybe you don't want a hand to take notes. You want to take notes on your tablet. And that's fine to do as well if your instructor's fine with it, which I think the majority are these days. So again, just using what works for you. If things frustrate you, if things are not a good match, then don't go that way. Be sure that you've read your homework before class. Read the chapter before you go in, like we talked about last week. Make sure that the reading is completed. It's going to help prepare your mind. Have those questions. What didn't make sense from the reading? What do you have questions from the last class about? Be sure that you ask those questions. Take the time to look over your notes from the previous class. Where did the instructor leave off? Again, just preparing your mind and knowing where you were at and what was covered. So those are a few things that you can do before class. So during class, you want to have a note-taking system. What works for you? Again, you don't want to write down every single word that the instructor is saying or that's on the PowerPoint. Be sure that you date your notes. If for some reason you dropped your notebook and things went scattered all over the place, you want to know, what order those go in. And also you could number those pages as well. You want to highlight or star key information. So as you're listening for cues, the instructor says the main point is, that is something that you would want to star or highlight so you know that the instructor gave you a little cue there. Listen for answers to your questions and be sure that you ask those questions if they're not answered. Use abbreviations, but know what those abbreviations mean to you. So, use the W with the slash symbol for with, or W/O for without. Don't write out numbers. Use the and sign. Abbreviate words, but again, be sure that you know what that system is. If your instructor is lecturing on the Revolutionary War, you don't want to write out Revolutionary War every time that it's spoken. And so write it out the first time and then create an abbreviation. So maybe it becomes, REV war, or maybe it becomes RW, but you have that up at the top written out, Revolutionary War equals RW, so that you remember and don't have that system figured out if you go back when you go back to study. Space your notes out. This is really, really important. You have an entire notebook, so don't feel like you have to have your notes right on top of each other. Leave space so that you can fill in, especially if you miss something. So if you miss something during the class, or during the lecture, you don't want to lean over to the person next to you and say, what was that last thing? I missed that. Because now you're missing whatever's coming after that. So leave a space in your notes. Talk with students afterwards. If a student doesn't know, then go and talk with the instructor. And then you can always ask if you could tape record the lectures. Some instructors may say no, but some instructors may say yes, and so that may help. There's also a pen that you can buy that tape records the lecture as you're writing the notes, and you use special paper, and when you tap the pen on that spot in the paper, it will go directly to that point in the lecture so that you could hear that back. I've had a lot of students who have used those who've said they've been extremely helpful, and you can find it at Target or at Amazon, and that might be something that's helpful for you. All right, after class, do what's called a data dump right after class. And so get anything that's in your head out of your head and into your notes. Clean up your notes, add to them. Make sure that you can read them. You don't want them to be a mess so that when you go back to study, you have no idea what you wrote down. Have a classmate that you compare your notes with. After the first couple of classes, go to your instructor's office hours. Show them your notes. Say, these are the points that I'm writing down. Am I getting the main ideas out of your lecture? I want to make sure that I have good notes to study off of. And then you need to review your notes every single day. Again, you are listening and you're getting things into your short-term memory, and you want to move them into your long-term memory. And the only way you're going to do that is by repetition. And so review your notes every single day. Okay, so we're going to talk about 3 different note-taking methods: the Cornell method, the Webb method, and the outline method. So the Cornell method is breaking your paper up into 3 different sections. They also sell Cornell note-taking pads, so you could use a pad of paper that you buy that's already sectioned off in the Cornell way. So the side section here is where you're going to write down main ideas or questions that you may have, vocabulary. You may do a graph in there, make connections, things like that. The middle part is where you're taking notes. and the summary is what you're doing in your own words. And so when you use the Cornell note-taking method, you are creating a system for you to study off of by having this done. And so you can cover up the note section and the summary and look at the questions or the main ideas that you've written over here and then answer that for yourself. Okay, and so if you've written questions here and you have the notes and the summary covered up, you can then answer those questions, uncover it to see if you're correct. Okay, so it's a system that will help you study down the line. So here's an example. So you've got types of leadership theory here. They have a drawing of Maslow's theory here. Here's a question: why do some believe in theory X and others theory Y? So if the notes were actually covered up and the summary area was covered up, you could ask yourself that and answer it, and then come back to find the answer. Okay, the web method. If you're a visual student, this might be a system that helps you. So you have your main idea in the middle with speech bubbles coming off off of the main topic. And then from those bubbles, you have things that are important from that area. So here we have note-taking, note cards, Cornell, outline, and webbing. And so then coming off of there comes the main ideas of that area. Here's another way of webbing. Somebody, again, who's very artistic, who likes to doodle, and this is the way in which they take notes. So try it. It may be something that works for you. The outline method, I think, is what most people are familiar with. But if the outline method is boring to you and you don't like it, then don't do it. So you could use Roman numerals, or you could also just use bullet points, whatever works for you. But you have the main idea, the subject, the descriptions below it, and so forth. And then here's an example of using the outline method of what that looks like in your notes. So a lot of people like this way. Again, it's about finding what works best for you. So some tips for note taking. Abbreviate. Again, leave space when you miss information. Number your pages and date your notes. Do a summary and edit your notes after class. That's going to help you in the long run. Yes, it's going to take more time. A lot of students want to leave class and that's it. But if you really need to build in that study time to help you, that's one way that you could really do it, is start summarizing your notes and editing them after every single class. Take notes even when you think you don't have to. So in 3 to 4 weeks, you're going to need something to jog your memory. And by having things jotted down, that's going to help you. When in doubt, write it down. It's better to have more notes than not enough. But again, do not write word for word. You're going to waste your time. You're not just in class to have a casual conversation. There are points that you need to remember, either for your career down the line or just to be tested in this subject for general education. You can shrink your notes down by leaving out unimportant words. So don't write in full sentences. Have skeleton notes that you know what they mean. And that's all that matters, is that you understand them. Okay? So try using some of these tips this week in some of your other classes as you take notes and see how it works for you.